Hi, my name is Simon Topliss, and I'm an architect and principal at Warren & Mahoney. I'm delighted to welcome you to another installment of our Dialogue webinar series. Dialogue is a forum that explores the big challenges and opportunities facing our industry as we seek to build a brave future in partnership with people, community, and the planet. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land and their leaders past and present, the Wurundjeri Wurrung and Bunurong people. Today, I'm going to share with you how our team has navigated the challenges of delivering mass timber projects in a market that is often set up to resist them. Drawing on experience delivering some of Australia's largest timber buildings and current large-scale projects in delivery, we'll explore the practical tools we use to move timber from design ambition to real-world construction, addressing cost, certainty, risk, delivery, and market confidence. I want to start by sharing an observation. I'm an architect and I've spent more time defending timber than designing it. I fought this battle on behalf of clients in cost plan meetings, in risk workshops, in front of boards, never once in design reviews. And in every conversation, I've asked myself, do I have the right tools to unlock timber? And what do we have to do to improve our chance of the client saying yes? So imagine you're sitting beside me in the project meeting where cost is being aggressively interrogated on every front. And Daniel, the QS, leans back and says in far more colourful language than what's on the screen, I cannot fathom a worse idea than using this But here we are amongst timber friends in this room, this series, and already understands mass timber, I hope, or at least wants to go on that journey. Its design challenges, structure, fire, carbon, prefabrication. And hopefully you don't need convincing. The real issue is this. In Australia and New Zealand, the construction industry is not set up yet to say yes to timber. But we are set up to say yes to what we already understand, to what we can benchmark, to what we can price quickly, to what feels safe. And here's the uncomfortable truth, and this is something I think we all know, by the way. Timber projects don't fail in design reviews. They don't fail because the details are wrong. They don't fail because the engineering is unresolved. Timber is lost in boardrooms. Timber fails when the conversation shifts from design to risk, from intent to cost, from possibility to lack of certainty. And so on our journey over the last few years with Daniel, the QS, and others who have since followed, we realized that we needed to stop trying to convince people that timber was good, because that argument doesn't cut through the board report. So instead, we asked a different question. What if timber isn't the hard part? What if risk is, cost is, approvals are? So this talk is about designing for the reality of our industry and the tools our teams are using every day to navigate mass timber from design to reality. And before we go any further, I want to be clear about where I'm coming from as an architect. I'm not here to speculate. I'm not here to sell an idea that I haven't tested in the market. I'm here because from 2017 to 2020, I led the architectural design teams at JCB Architects that delivered two of Australia's largest residential mass timber projects. Gillies Hall, a 150-bed student accommodation project for Monash University, 7,000 square metres of GFA, Australia's largest passive house certified project when built, complete with a full mass timber plate and panel structure, supplied out of Italy and built by Multiplex. We interviewed for design services in June 2017, and students moved in 20 months later in February 2019. This wasn't theoretical. It was documented, costed, tendered, built. And following that, La Trobe University's North and South apartments, nearly 18,000 square metres of GFA, a CLT panel and plate structure supplied and built by the same team. We installed enough CLT panels to almost cover the MCG twice over. It felt like we had changed the playing field. We interviewed for architectural services in June 2018, And the buildings opened 26 months later in August 2020, in the middle of the global pandemic. We may not have had students to sleep in their rooms, but we were operational. And that matters because it really proved something about certainty. These weren't concept projects. They were tendered, costed, and delivered at scale. What started in 2017 on my visit to a factory in Italy became two of Australia's largest mass timber buildings. In La Trobe and Monash University, we had clients who were willing to back innovation and carbon leadership. What I underestimated was how hard the real world pushes back once the novelty wears off. And on reflection, I think these projects survived as novelty, one-off buildings, backed by exceptional clients, delivered under very special conditions. By the end of 2020, with La Trobe complete, that era was effectively over. When I left JCB and joined WAM, one thing became clear. If mass timber is going to matter in the real world, it has to be bankable and repeatable and not heroic. And if that sounds theoretical, let me ground it. Because once novelty is gone, the only thing that matters is whether timber can survive normal market conditions. Multiple projects, different clients, different cities, real scrutiny. And in my first few years here, we lost timber on projects. The UTS First Nations College, a project with deeply embedded sustainability aspirations, where timber should have been straightforward, and it was met with firm market response. There is no appetite and too much risk. And we were deeply frustrated. But we've stayed true to course and we've navigated our way through. And I think we are now seeing a big shift in the market. So I want to share a little of what we have underway, but more importantly, what tools we're using to get there. We have an exciting new wave of timber residential projects, and they begin to go on site at the end of this year, 2026. Large scale and market tested timber projects. In Adelaide, a 250-bed student accommodation project for Flinders University, which is still awaiting university approvals to go to tender. But we've got 8,000 square metres of GFA utilising a CLT panel and plate approach. Daniel didn't win the cost battle on this. We proved a cost plan that was cost neutral and delivered with timber an approach that took 3 months off the program and de-risked term start dates for the client. North of Sydney, we have a 450-bed student accommodation project for Newcastle University out to tender. Again, full CLT structure. A cost plan that wasn't even initially close to working for timber. We turned around to be neutral. And we understand that buildings who are pricing it are incredibly receptive to the approach that we've taken. And in Melbourne, we're working with Model, a client who is absolutely committed to changing the sustainability story. The Cordial Factory, 155 build-to-rent apartments, a full CLT panel and plate structure. And for the same client, 276 Johnson Street, 225 build-to-rent apartments, over 17 stories, utilising a post and plate structure. And both aim to be on site by the end of this year. Combined, that's almost $400 million worth of mass timber projects. This isn't a highlight reel. For us, it's momentum, and we believe real change, which raises the real question: where are all the other projects? Why do so many good timber projects still fail in 2026? These projects didn't survive simply because the clients were enlightened. They didn't survive because our teams were braver than everyone else. They survived because we worked the problem. These are large, real, market-facing projects. And trust me, we almost failed. They were costed poorly. They were challenged without the right facts. And our credibility was seriously questioned. Cost panic, installation anxiety, supply chain fear, wild assumptions. None of this was about structure. None of this was about design. None of this was about fire. None of this was about whether timber really worked. What sounded like hostility wasn't. What sounded like conservatism wasn't. It was uncertainty speaking out loud. We realized beyond design workshops, there was simply no point trying to sell timber harder. Those qualities that we believe in, embodied carbon, the authenticity of material, warmth, innovation, even speed, it never works because belief is not a substitute for certainty. So we stopped selling timber and we focused on one thing, de-risking it. And that shift changed our thinking completely. The rules didn't move. The market didn't change. We did. We rethought and redesigned how our projects met the system, how they got to site, and focused on how cost certainty was built, not hoped for. And that's where the real work began. Designing to de-risk timber isn't about belief or persuasion. It's about method. So let's talk about the tools. Tool 1, design for cost legibility. If it can't be priced, it can't be defended. And this is the rule where most timber projects break first. Everyone on this call, no doubt, has potentially incredible skills at designing optimized structures and knocking out that first concept. The issue is we then always ask the QS to second guess and catch up. Well, that's backwards. Any QS can get comfortable with the big ticket timber elements, the panels, the beams, the volume rates. That part is really legible. Where the cost logic falls over is everything around it. Penetrations, protections, connections, plates, tolerances, imperfections, carriage and cranage, etc., etc. And when the QS can't see those costs clearly, they do what the system asks them to do. They protect the budget with contingencies. Not because they're anti-timber, because they're anti-surprise. So if you want your timber project to survive, you have to go the extra mile and close that loop. Make the interfaces priceable, make the build sequence visible, and remove the unknowns before they get priced as fair. So we stopped asking the QS to imagine how the building might work and started showing them. We closed out the penetration and protection strategies. We define approach to connections that minimized site labor. We made sure installation assumptions were explicit. We recognize that timber is a system. When you do this, contingencies shrink. Not because costs drop, but because fear does. You're not eliminating risk, you're making it visible and therefore manageable. Tool 2, installation is a design issue. And uncertainty kills confidence faster than cost. If people can't picture how it gets built, they sidestep benefit and assume risk. And in an adverse market, that's all it takes for confidence to evaporate. Timber is a system. Systems fail when sequencing is an afterthought. Mass timber lives or dies on installation. If you're not thinking about sequencing, access, lifting, and adjacent trades, you're not designing timber, you're simply sketching it. Leaving installation to later doesn't delay risk, it concentrates it. And your QSs and project managers will see straight through you. So we started refining the build before we drew the details. We think about the lamella and the time on the fabrication bed. We think about the containerization and transport. We think about lifts and cranage. We think about panel sequencing. And we think about how hard to remove complexity and to simplify and accelerate the trades that follows. When the sequence is clear, timber stops feeling risky. Tool 3, we drag the market in early. We'll test the market at tender. Is the moment when the project starts dying. It's not testing, it's validation of failure. By then, risk is baked in. Positions are entrenched. And the only option that still feels defendable is concrete. Not because it's better, because it's familiar. We speak to suppliers, installers, and contractors while the design is still fluid. Not to ask permission or dimensional tolerances, but to understand constraints, sequencing, and risks that only appear once you've built these systems before. When the market can see itself in the design, confidence follows. Taking a hybrid approach, designing out glulam beams to remove fire-rated penetrations, wasn't selling out an all timber design. It's about making it easier for the market to deliver. That's when the market stops pushing back and starts engaging. Tool 4, kill bad assumptions early. Unchallenged assumptions are how good projects quietly die. Every timber cost plan carries assumptions about fire, tolerances, protection, sequencing, and supply. And if you don't confront them early, the market will assume the worst. Earlier last week, a colleague working on a building in Auckland literally said to me, "Simon, how do I optimize the design?" The QS was telling me the CLT floors are $500 a square meter once you consider all the add-ons. And the concrete tray deck is $150 a square meter. I said, "Tom, the design is not the issue you need to get forensic on, it's their assumptions." So we drill into the intent behind the detail, the factory costs, the wall build-ups, the fire protection logic, the installation complexity. We test what's driving uncertainty, not just where it shows up. And we do it early, while the answers are still cheap. When the intent is clear, the factory can price it, the builder can sequence it, and the QS can benchmark it. Projects don't fail because assumptions exist. They fail because no one knew how to dismantle them. Tool 5, speak the board's language. Boards don't approve buildings, they approve risk. Boards aren't there to debate materials, they're there to protect the institutions. They don't ask, is timber exciting? They ask, can it be defended if it goes wrong? Risk. Do we understand it? Is the cost logic defendable? Is the program and pathway credible? And what is the reputational upside? Is it real? When these 4 things are clear, boards don't debate timber, they approve the project. If you can't say these 4 things with utter confidence, the board will quietly say no. I want to finish by grounding this back in something real. My team in Melbourne is applying this blueprint right now on the 4 projects I shared earlier, not as theory, but as practice. And at 276 Johnson Street, we're delivering what we believe will be an industry shifting project. A 17-story passive house certified, 230 bed apartment build to rent development with mass timber locked in through the consenting process. That didn't happen because timber was exciting. It happened because the logic was disciplined. We're working closely with the Planning Minister and the Office of Victorian Government Architect to demonstrate carbon leadership, certainty that they can stand behind. And we're doing this with an exceptional client in Rory Hunter and Model, who understands what a blueprint for change really means. Method over rhetoric. And he also recognises we need the market alongside the projects. This isn't about waiting for the market to change. It's about proving project by project it already can. By being on this call, you're already, I hope, on the timber journey. So if in the last 20 minutes I've given you even one new tool to navigate the path in front of your projects, well, that's enough. And it's important to me because I deeply believe in the good of timber, because I firmly believe in the authenticity of timber, or the warmth it brings to the interiors of our work, of the generosity it especially shows in residential architecture. I firmly believe that mass timber can take us away from the mire, the mud, and the mess that are traditional building sites into a new paradigm of off-site, prefabricated, modular, and hyper-efficient construction that is ultimately going to help us deliver better and more cost-effective outcomes for our communities. And I fundamentally believe that mass timber, if sourced and manufactured responsibly, is a critical tool in unlocking carbon reduction in the construction industry. Because the real question isn't whether timber works, it's whether you're willing to challenge the status quo and affect your own blueprint for change. It's your move. Thank you.